Um, yeah, so the title of the talk is Engineering for Happiness, and I suppose the rationale for the designing the talk was really thinking about just, I guess, the return to work after, or the return to the office rather, after COVID, and starting to think about, like, as we're reflecting on what we want from our jobs, and how we want things to be. It felt like the right time to be thinking about happiness, and about, if you can, think about your work and engineering it for yourself to make it better, then now seems like a good time to be doing it. So I suppose to start off, like, I enjoy my job and I get a lot of satisfaction and happiness from building cool tools, doing work that has impact for so many people. I've previously worked in healthcare, and now working in fintech, with products that serve millions of people around the world. And it's really nice to have that that kind of impact. And I understand for myself that those are the kind of things that give me satisfaction. And so I try to find those things in the work that I'm doing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what are the things that sort of lead to that, and how can you think about doing that for yourself, but also doing that within the context of your team, and I suppose then ultimately doing it within the context of your organization or community, if you work in open source. And hopefully some of this is practical. Hopefully some of the things here that I'm going to talk about are things that you can take action with, and start to make a real impact in terms of creating the circumstances that will allow for you to be happier and in your work. I think then once you're happier, you're going to start impacting the happiness of those around you. And if you think about that, if your teammates come in and they're all in a bad mood, or depressed, or annoyed and frustrated with the way that the way that things are going, it's very difficult to have a positive mental attitude in the face of that. And so there's a real onus on you, therefore, to look after yourself, make sure that you're in a good position, and then that you can provide that positive emotional support to those around you, and making sure that their happiness is addressed. So those all sound like very broad things. So if we boil them down to a little bit more, thinking more about the definitions of what that actually looks like, I just want to clear a couple of things up. So the first is that happiness is really about contentment. It's more like the little guy on the left here. It's about being happy with things on a day-to-day basis. It's also about things being simple. I think we can recognize that in design. We're always trying to simplify the systems. We're always trying to be parsimonious and being efficient with the way that things work. And that should be how you should be thinking about happiness. You should be happy with something that you've developed, if it's frugally developed and simple. One other point there I would make is that it's anti-patterns and anti-definitions are something I always find easy to help with defining things. And I just want to say that happiness isn't really about just laughing all the time like some sort of maniac. And it's not the absence of suffering. Work is always going to be difficult, and there will always be challenges. That's what we have to deal with in work. So it's not about the avoidance of any of those things, but it is about fostering a sense of contentment, joy, and belonging in your workplace, and the hope, therefore, that would lead to you being happier too. So this is a little exercise I think it's worth doing to think about kind of how to identify your values, and therefore the things that are likely to bring happiness to you. So if you think about the last time you did put in a PR or finished some kind of design artifact maybe that you completed at work, what was the feeling that you had? Were you feeling that it was a really elegant solution? Were really feeling really smug about the fact that it was so well done? Was it about addressing some sort of previously unmet user need, or was it about the fact that you got it done really quickly? And zoning in on those kind of feelings is a really important exercise to do, to try and like understand a little bit about yourself, and therefore understand like what are the underlying values that lead to those feelings. And I recommend things like journaling to try and keep a log of how things are going, to zone in on the values and the feelings that you're having, so that you can work out what are the levers that you can pull on to make things go better. So if you like really elegant things, maybe the values are managing complexity, could be helping others, could be efficiency. And then what you should try and do is kind of like seek out opportunities to find more examples of those things. So helping others, meeting user needs, maybe move into a more client-facing role, or seek out opportunities to meet with the client more often. Not everyone enjoys doing that, so your impact in terms of the team will be good, and you're getting to do something that you want. So it's really about looking for those kind of win-win sort of opportunities within work, and being clear about like what's likely to get you into a happier place with your work, and then explicitly asking from those from your boss. So you might have come across the idea of mastery, autonomy, and purpose, and I think these are things that we should be looking for in order to achieve flow and to achieve happiness at work. So I'm not going to go through the ideas of mastery and autonomy, except to say that doing the things that you like doing and being given the power to do them is really important, and likely to help you achieve flow. And flow is really that sense of everything else has disappeared and you're just off listening to that music, figuring out that problem, and the hours go by and you don't remember what's going on or how much time has passed. That's the sort of like, that's really happiness, that's contentment. You're just living in the moment. Again, talking about anti-patterns, procrastination is a real anti-pattern, and that's a real flag that you've entered into some sort of zone where you're not happy, and it's likely that one of these three things is missing. The purpose is missing, the mastery, you don't know how to do it, or the autonomy, you're being micromanaged, and that's why you're not achieving flow. So look out for procrastination and try to understand like what's driving why you're not happy. In terms of the team, here it's about aligning on a particular mission or value. So the practical tasks to take part in here are develop a team charter, come up with some kind of manifesto. As we've seen with the agile movement, the manifesto is really important for aligning people around particular values, and making sure that that people understood what those values were. And it's really important to have to call out when those values aren't being addressed. So if you have quality as a value, make sure that when you're reviewing PRs and putting out work, that the quality really is front and center of what you're doing, what you're delivering. So I don't have enough time to go through the example here, except to say that just in terms of then how do you do it with organizations. It's really the similar kinds of things that are important at the team level. It's about having a clear vision. It's about having a clear purpose, and a clear mission. And then a lot of it's actually just about reciting that and being very clear and being very easy for people to contribute to the overall vision and purpose of the organization you're working in. And they see that then that their efforts in that direction are rewarded, and in that way it's possible for people to get real reinforcement around the work that they're doing being appreciated, and that appreciation is really important for making people want to do more work. So it's more likely for the organization to be happy because more work's getting done, more values getting created. And I think one of the other ones is one of the other key points here is the importance of kindness. And here I don't mean going around giving people hugs or mollycoddling people. I just mean at the end of the day a lack of incivility. So making sure that the people are nice to each other, that they're polite and respectful, and creating a culture that includes people and treats people with respect. And I think if you have these things, they sound very simple, but they are very effective whenever they're implemented at scale within an organization. So then to sum up, to be happy in work, what you need to do is you need to find a role that you're likely to be able to master, find one that aligns with your personal values, start doing that, repeat that appreciation delivery kind of cycle, and then just be kind to yourself and to others. And that's it. Thank you. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Niall. Yeah, so there's a couple of kind of sent through here. During your talk, you mentioned about journaling. Is this something that you practice yourself, or do you have any kind of tips of people that get into journaling?
Yeah, so it's actually somebody gave a really nice talk at the NI DevConf talking about this, about the value of journaling. I can't remember their name right now, but I'll search it and drop it into the chat afterwards. But it was around this sort of like brag list, and the way I would kind of describe it or summarize, paraphrase it, is kind of like at the end of every day, kind of write down what you've done. At the end of every week, roll that up into what you've done. At the end of every month, roll that up into what you've done. End of the quarter, roll the 3 months up. End of the year, roll the 4 quarters up. And what you end up with is, it's quite a useful list of all of the things that you've been working on and that you've delivered. And this is important for a couple of reasons. One is you tend to forget all the work you've done. You help out a lot of people, and it's easy to overlook that. There's a real currency bias when it comes to end of year reviews. But there's also a lot of failed kind of experiments that you work on during the year, and this is another kind of way to to identify those and reflect on them. Why did they fail? Sometimes it's perfectly correct that they fail, by the way, this initiative, and sometimes you have to try things 2 or 3 times in order to hit upon a success. So the journal just helps you kind of reflect on that quite dispassionately as well. It's just this happened, then that happened. Another hint that I like is just writing in the third person, or writing not I did this, trying to just this was done, or something like that. It gets away from that sort of inclination that I think a lot of people here have, is not to be bragging. So maybe don't call it a brag list, maybe call it something else. But the idea is that you by writing down for 30 seconds at the end of the day, you quit. That's very low effort. But then at the end of the year, you have something quite valuable.
Sorry, no, I had a couple of wee points as well. I think it's great that you touched upon the different values that were what people would find successful in their own sort of work. I think another thing that I kind of thought of was, it is a question of what success looks like to you, right? So I like the way you touched on deliverables, but also those small interactions during the day where you maybe helped out somebody that you've maybe and that's maybe brought you, lifted your mood. And I like Chris actually said for me to do it, which is the little book of wins. And it's maybe create a little book, like you were saying about the journal, of things that I did well. But I think I just love the entire concept of this presentation, and I think the mood does shine as well through the work that's produced. So whilst you think that you're just throwing out code and that'll be fine, it's maybe going to be janky, it's maybe going to break, it's maybe going to it's not going to be the best that it can be. And I think that does shine through in the products that we deliver, because even I remember when my customer service days, I used to go in and do trials in places, and you could instantly sense the vibe of a place, and I was like, no, not for me. But yeah, no, it just really I think a question that I had was just would you say that there's a world though where everybody, whilst you listed out those sort of different sort of that matrix of how people can find happiness in themselves and their roles, do you think there is a world though where it can be an interchangeable thing and it can be kind of a mix of everything?
I think one of the things I struggled with was always like this idea of like aligning to your values. Was like this idea that you had to work in some kind of like ethical company in order to have your values addressed. And I don't know if anyone here has worked for a charity or a social enterprise, but it's not always true that they are great places. And in fact, some of the absolute worst stories I can tell are about some of the most quote unquote ethical companies. And I think that realization can like help me reframe the question about, is the org aligned to my values, is more about like, well, what's the more local kind of value system of the team that I'm directly interacting with. Like what do they put pride in? What do they want to be better at? And like, will working with that group of people help me move forward in some value that I want to have, that I want to move forward in.
Yeah, like when you kind of mentioned about the company culture, so I fit into like another question submitted. Like one of the big things at the minute is like a lot of companies want to like define their culture, and this is what they are, and this is what they stand for, and they want everyone wants to be happy. How does that kind of like fit into like potentially your happiness? How do you work with a company's culture? Like, what if you don't agree with everything that they agree with? How can you kind of think and deal with those things?
I'd probably need an example, but I suppose if you don't agree with their values, and sort of like the practices and the culture, you probably need to move. Because I'd love to tell you that like companies are open to everybody changing the culture to fit them, but it's unlikely. Now it's not always possible to move, so but so then you start to come into like making accommodations, and then then I think you need to look at like, yeah, which values do you want to focus on, and maybe come up with some kind of rationale or plan. Like another thing I'm a big fan of is setting goals. And that was one of the things meant to put into this, is like, now's the time to be thinking about this stuff. What does make you happy? If you think about yourself in a year from now, like, am I going to be happier or sadder? Like, what would happier Niall look like? Right? What would he be doing? How can I do more of that? How can I get there? And so if you're in somewhere where you don't find yourself aligned with the goals, then at least try to find like personal goals for you that at least move you forward. Even if you're unlikely to be able to change the goals of the org. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned goals there, because I've been thinking about this a lot recently myself. Like I was a manager like a couple of years ago, and I don't think I ever set goals for my team, which probably was a negative thing. The team turned okay, so they're a good bunch of people. Like when you're kind of thinking about goals, and even if it's just like personal goals, like what are the kind of like what's the kind of guidebook to like setting yourself goals, and how to like also achievable goals, I guess, as well?
Yeah, there's a few books out there on this, and maybe it's just some like talks that I've seen. I really like the OKR framework from Google. I've seen a couple of good videos by some people there. And then that like Atomic Habits talks a lot about like setting really like small goals. Like as an example, like this year I've been exercising a lot more, and I've stuck with it a lot better by setting the goal of 2 times a week. And I think every other time I've tried it, it's like been 3. And like outside of like team sports, I've never really been able to keep up with the 3, but the 2 I've managed. And so it's like by setting less ambitious goals is the key. So here I'm over 12 months later, and it's stuck. So set less of them, and set them smaller and less ambitious.
A couple of things you said in your talk there that resonated a lot with me. One of them being like, happiness is not necessarily equal to suffering. Like, not suffering. And then you kind of wrapped up with be kind to yourself and to others, which is I think the most important thing in the workplace is love, like conducting everything with like a degree of love. And I found that when I'm working remote, and say you don't treat yourself with kindness, maybe you got some imposter syndrome or something like that. Maybe you can infer that someone that's chatting to you asynchronously, it has like an ill intent, and that can like negatively affect your happiness. I've found that just assume that everybody has the best intentions, and then that, you know, even if they don't, maybe if they're trying to hurt, you know, maybe it's just better to assume that everybody's looking out for each other and practicing what you're preaching regarding being kind to yourself and everybody around you.
Yeah, I think that's a
Yes,
good point about the assuming good intent, and I think that is a good one for chats. Like I definitely find myself doing that today, and it was a new WhatsApp group, and I was just like, I find myself kind of going, did they mean this? I had to like talk myself down from like assuming malintent. And you know, like the reality is people aren't thinking about it. People aren't thinking about you as much as you think. And you know, I think you're better off conserving your energy and using that in other places, like, and trying not to dwell on things.
Totally. And like, I couldn't agree more. And I think as well, the assuming positive intent doesn't necessarily mean that, like, you know, people aren't going to push back on decisions or going to do things. It's more assuming that shared goal, whatever it may be. I think is like, even when it is a negative situation, it's just assume that they're coming from a good place. And even to think, you know, having empathy, I think I wrote it in the chat, because empathy, obviously designer, I love empathy. It's like, yeah, it's paramount on how we treat each other too. And so, you know, if somebody is grumpy or, you know, in a bad mood, kind of think, yeah, maybe I'll be a wee bit extra kinder to them, even though they're being a dick to me, you know, because you don't know what's happened to cause that.
I see one of the questions from the chat there about how do you be kind but also bring in accountability. But I think where my mind goes anyway with this question is thinking about the 5 dysfunctions of the team, and about how you've got this sort of like pyramid of sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But at the bottom of that is this idea that, you know, trust is key in a team. Without trust, can't have accountability, and these kind of things. Like, and I think kindness is really important for establishing trust. You know, just as Louise is in there, empathy as well. Like, you can't have or kindness and empathy, very adjacent kind of concepts. So I think, like, in order to have accountability within a team, you need to have trust. In order to have trust, you need to have kindness. So it's really, you need, if you like, the kindness and the trust are sort of like building blocks to bring in accountability. Once you trust each other, you trust that the other person does have the right intention and that they're trying to move the team forward. And accountability is a real positive reinforcer for good team behaviors and for creating happiness. You know, if you didn't have accountability, if you just were given free license to do whatever you wanted, it's unlikely that the you would be successful, or that the team would be successful. And so, like, I think people realize that the accountability is required, you know, particularly when it comes to like having those values. You know, like, so if you have a value of security in your workplace, then, you know, you all need to call each other out when that doesn't exist. And I think, you know, you got to ultimately see that as being kind to the other person, is not letting them get away with something that they wouldn't be happy with. You know, you've all signed up to this like team charter or these team values. I suppose that's implicit in the answer there, that you've all said, yeah, we all want to do this. And so it is kind to tell people you haven't done this, because we all ultimately want to get to this shared goal. I don't know if that answers your question, Julian.
Yeah, I think it was really cool. And sometimes those hard conversations are like really, really hard to have. And in a lot of cases, like, they don't happen often enough. And it ends up being the stage where, like, you know, someone's surprised that they're not being held accountable and that they're not achieving what the team thinks they're achieving. There was another kind of question came in through here, and it was talking, like, and I think it was kind of touched on one point earlier, where, you know, a lot of places are doing like the return to work. We had the kind of flexibility for years, sometimes full remote. Like, how have you seen this kind of affecting like the happiness of developers, you know, is it a positive bringing people in? Is it the negative bringing people in? Is the hybrid good or bad?
So I suppose I'll answer this like sort of personally, I guess, like, and personally, I feel like there's a lot of value in fostering a sense of community and a sense of like shared collective effort, and that we as developers benefit from, you know, having other people that we work with who have, you know, specializations. So, you know, I benefit from having designers. I'm terrible at it. So we need, you know, we need groups of people to do big things, and that there is a power from having like place and proximity. You know, there's a great proxy for or it was a great enabler of innovation and of having a diversity of ideas that's really hard to get away from. And you know, even thinking like, say, in terms of Belfast, you know, like one of the reasons Belfast tech scene is successful is that there's a critical mass behind, you know, particular industries like cybersecurity and fintech. So it's really hard to sort of argue that you know, like fully remote, totally distributed is you know, is going to be the best way for everyone. I think though that it is possible to be, and there are really good examples of fully remote companies that have really nailed the culture. What I think they've managed to do though is create really good online communities and really good online distributed asynchronous communication, so that they typically are much stronger at writing than other than synchronous organizations. And I think that's really the big challenge. I think if you're really good at writing, you can write down, here's what I need, give it to somebody, and they can go off and do it without coming back to you. Then the remote working is going to work. But I haven't seen a lot of organizations that are capable of the kind of discipline that's required for asynchronous work, and therefore it creates a lot of friction. And then I think there's just, you know, like going back to like the purpose kind of stuff, like I think there's just a lot to be said for feeling that sense of collective action, you know, and doing things together, that I think yeah, is just really powerful for people.
Yeah. Oh, like, and I even think, well, I don't think there is like the right answer with like the hybrid, the full remote, the full in the office. It's kind of just each team, each person has their own kind of way of working. And I think people will like inevitably find the rhythm that works for them. Awesome, cool. That was an amazing talk and an amazing conversation there with the different questions. Like, thank you so much, Niall.